today's Top Boxing News.
Okay, we'll start with this. America's own Tiaria Brown, who was in action not but a few days ago, called out Sky Nicolson after defeating Gabriela Bouvier to become Sky's mandatory challenger for the WBC featherweight world title. Will Sky settle up with her? We know that Tiaria has been calling out Sky for what feels like 2 years now. That's right. She's been hot on her trail, but only recently did Tiaria Brown actually start fighting in the eliminators that would move her up the WBC's ranks. It's funny because Tiara's been around a lot longer than Sky, and she's got more professional bouts than Sky, but Sky got a title shot before her.
Why?
It's the eliminators, or the lack thereof, the WBC elimination bouts that officially move you up those ranks and get you that title shot. Tiaria wasn't with a major promotional outfit. To my knowledge, she still isn't. So when you don't have that backing from a promoter to pay to sanction those bouts as eliminators, it can take a while for you to get a title shot. That's why Tiaria Brown, with an unblemished record of 17-0, 11 KOs, has not yet fought for a title. That even though she's been around longer than Sky and she has more fights than Sky, more pro experience, she hasn't had the chance to fight for a title yet.
Only recently, in her last 2 fights, I believe, her last 2, did she start fighting in eliminators.
Currently, Tiara is ranked at number 3, behind former champion Sarah Mahfoud, who's ranked at number 1, behind former champion Erica Cruz, who's ranked at number 2. Tiara comes in at number 3 in the last set of WBC ranked standings, but you have to figure that Sky already fought Sarah Mahfoud and beat her. That was earlier this year. And Erica's on the eve of being suspended for testing positive for a banned substance, Winstrol, which is what costed her her WBA title.
I don't even know what Erica's doing there. Erica was champion at 122. She doesn't campaign at 126. Why does the WBC have her ranked?
Doesn't make sense, and what it looks like is Tiaria Brown, in spite of being ranked at number 3, currently, she's the WBC's highest ranked contender. So she's inching closer to that shot at Sky Nicolson. Currently, Sky has a fight coming up against the Dominican Republic's Diana Vargas on the undercard of Boots Ennis versus David Evanesian.
Right.
It was originally thought that if Sky beats Diana next week, she'll move on from that to face Raven Chapman afterwards. But now,
it looks like she might end up fighting Tiara.
Because Tiara is ranked at number 3 and Raven Chapman is ranked down there at number 7. In truth, I can go for either fight. Nicolson versus Brown or Nicolson versus Chapman. They're both good fights.
But Nicolson versus Chapman, as good as it is, it doesn't have the backstory that the Brown fight has. That things have been a lot more cordial between Sky and Raven than Sky and Tiara.
I told you, Tiaria has been quite vocal about fighting Sky Nicolson for what feels like the last 2 years.
Tiara's been calling out Sky since before Sky won the WBC title. She's been calling her out well before that.
And it didn't really make sense before to do a fight with Sky and Tiara because Sky was just getting started. She was just starting out. Tiara was much further along
in terms of experience.
But now that Sky is a champion, she's got the WBC title, she's got a belt, and it looks like Tiara is the mandatory for it. That sets the precedent for them to fight after the Vargas fight. That I wouldn't mind it at all if we get Nicolson versus Brown before we get Nicolson versus Chapman. They're both great fights, dangerous fights for Sky Nicolson. Sky,
well,
it doesn't look like she's ever going to get the chance to face Amanda Serrano, who she's been calling out just about as long as Tiara's been calling her out.
It doesn't look like we're ever going to get a Nicolson versus Serrano fight. Amanda Serrano, she's moving up to 140. She's fighting Katie Taylor again.
That doesn't look to be happening. Sky had hoped to legitimize herself in front of her critics by facing Amanda Serrano. That doesn't look to be happening. But yet another way that Sky can legitimize herself is by beating Tiaria Brown, by beating Raven Chapman. Can she do it?
The water runs deep at 126. Those are shark-infested waters. Tiaria Brown,
she's a shark. So is Raven.
Another way that Sky Nicolson can legitimize herself is by fighting them and beating them. The thing is that beating them That's not a foregone conclusion.
It's really not a foregone conclusion that Sky Nicolson beats Tiaria Brown. I mean, look at Shannon Ryan, Matchroom's fighter in the super flyweight division. She just lost Ramla Ali this past weekend.
She just lost for the second time.
So does the bell toll for thee? Does the bell toll for Sky Nicolson to be the next Matchroom Valkyrie that suffers her first professional loss? We'll find out shortly. In men's lightweight news, boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted to Dan Rafael's ballpark figure for the Gervonta Davis vs. Frank Martin pay-per-view. Rick Glacier said, a quote from a boxing executive in regards to Dan Rafael's 325 to 350,000 pay-per-view buys for Davis vs. Martin. That number is so crazy. Dan Rafael has lost all journalistic integrity, and anyone that believes that buy number should get a lobotomy.
Before Dan Rafael came out with his number, Rick Glacier came out with his, and he put the buy rate for the show at around 150,000, just under 150,000.
Dan's number is more than 2 times the ballpark figure that Rick Glacier put out there, so who do you believe? Do you believe Rick Glacier, or do you believe Dan Rafael? Rick Glacier's not the only one that put the viewing figures in the neighborhood of 150 to 200,000. Insider Jedi Goodman, he put out a similar figure.
150 to 220,000.
Rick and Jedi's viewing figures are in keeping with the baseline, the median number for a Gervonta Davis fight, what he normally does,
which is normally around 200,000.
Remember that he was on pay-per-view 5 times before he ever fought Ryan Garcia. The Ryan Garcia fight made 6, and the recent Frank Martin fight made 7.
And in the vast majority of those pay-per-view appearances, Gervonta Davis's numbers were in the neighborhood of 200,000, just north or just under 200,000.
So who do you believe? Do you believe Rick Glacier's number, Jedi Goodman's, or Dan Rafael's?
Do you believe Dan?
I don't. Well, I don't. I don't believe Dan's number. I don't believe the pay-per-view did in the neighborhood of 325 and 350, and I don't believe it from Dan because Dan is the same guy who in January said the PBC would be doing 12 to 14 shows on Amazon Prime this calendar year, and that doesn't look to be happening.
He said they made a multi-year commitment, emphasis on commitment, to do 12 to 14 shows this year. We're in July, and so far they've only done 3.
By year's end, they'll be lucky if they will have done 6. 6 to 7 is a far cry from 12 to 14. And that's what Dan said back in January. The following month in February, Dan said that we were supposed to be seeing a non-pay-per-view show on Amazon in June. June came and went, and there was no non-pay-per-view show. The only show the PBC did on Amazon in the month of June was the Davis versus Martin fight.
And what Dan is saying, what he's now saying, is that the Davis versus Martin fight did 350,000 pay-per-view buys. Yeah, I don't believe you. I don't believe it from Dan.
Sorry, but I'm not going to take it from Dan when so much of the intel that he's been putting out there doesn't check out. You said that the PBC would do 12 to 14 shows this calendar year. That doesn't look to be happening. You said they would do a free show in June. That didn't happen. And now you're saying this?
I don't believe you.
Rick Glacier has made it a question of integrity. Dan's journalistic integrity, if he has any left, and the commitment to putting out accurate information and not just putting anything out there, anything just for the sake of putting anything out there for clicks, for metrics.
Calling Dan a sellout.
Is that the situation? Is Dan Rafael being used as another arm of promotion for the PBC and keeping up with the Joneses and keeping up for appearance's sake? Fudging the number and exaggerating about the show's success to make it seem more successful than it actually was. I feel like it breaks down 2 ways. It's either Dan is in fact being used as a paid arm of promotion for the PBC, or Dan is getting lied to.
Neither would surprise me.
It's just that he's being lied to, that the intel he's receiving is not good intel, and what he's receiving is intended to make the PBC look good and make the situation look more stable. than it actually is. Why else would they tell you they're going to do 12 to 14 shows this year when we can see that they're not?
We're 7 months into this year and they've only done 3 shows. There are no shows planned for this month.
PBC ain't got nothing going on in the month of July, and only rumors, just rumors, about one show in August, then maybe, one in September, and one more in November.
What's that, 7 shows? That's half.
7 is half the number of shows you initially reported they were going to do this year. It seems that either you fudged the numbers or you got fudged numbers.
So you can make it a question about Dan's journalistic integrity or the lack thereof.
Or you can say, don't shoot the messenger. Dan is just relaying the information that he's being given. In either situation, it all means the same thing. The intel is bad. The intel isn't accurate. It's not checking out whether Dan is deliberately fudging numbers or deliberately lying, or he's being lied to. The information in and of itself is not reliable.
And that's the focus.
Is the information good? Well, so far, when it comes to the PBC on Amazon, it hasn't been.
And do you remember when Dan Rafael said that Canelo vs. Golovkin 3 only sold about 500,000 pay-per-view buys?
Do you remember when he said that? And do you remember that shortly after that, DAZN themselves came forward and confirmed it did 1 million. It did 1 million buys, just like the first 2 fights.
2 times the number that Dan Rafael initially reported.
I found it peculiar that after DAZN made that official press release confirming that the pay-per-view sold just over 1 million, he actually tried to argue with Eddie Hearn online about it. You're a journalist. Why are you arguing?
Do you think you know more about it than Eddie Hearn does? Than DAZN does?
These days, platforms don't customarily come out and confirm the viewing figures for what box office fights they do, but DAZN did. They're telling you it did over 1 million, and you're telling them that it didn't.
Because you and your sources know more about it than they do.
Or is it because it made you look bad? That here you are, putting out this bullshit number via your bullshit sources just to get debunked.
Who are your sources?
Stefan Espinoza? Leonard Ellerby? People at the PBC? Is that who your inside sources are? And is that why the information comes out the way that it does?
My thoughts.
You have to take what's out there with a grain of salt, irrespective of where it comes from, whether it's Dan Rafael or someone else. You have to take it with a grain of salt and a pinch of common sense. That Dan Rafael's number is not the only number that's out there. There are other numbers out there.
So use your common sense. Do you think that fight really sold 350,000 pay-per-view buys when nobody was asking for it?
Is that what Gervonta Davis normally does with a box office fight when he doesn't have Ryan to help him? Is that what the numbers normally look like?
No.
So use your head. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Ryan Garcia's father, Henry Garcia, has publicly appealed to him to get therapy. I haven't spoken to Ryan in a long time. He speaks to his mother more than me, but it's okay. He'll call me when he wants to. I would love for him to get some type of therapy when it comes to his drinking. I'm being real. He says he can control it. I hope he can, but if he doesn't, get therapy so he can stop.
Henry says he hasn't spoken to his own son in a long time.
What his own son says, what Ryan says, is I don't even drink anymore. My dad doesn't know what he's talking about. I was literally just talking to him, and he has apologized.
Should we believe that from Ryan, when not but a little over a week ago, he was seen drinking? He was seen drinking at the poker table.
Chris Eubank Jr. was there, several others, and Ryan Garcia was literally seen drinking. So if he stopped since then, it hasn't been all that long now, has it? What, you stopped for a week?
Couple of days.
A couple of hours. Ryan Garcia can't be taken seriously when he says that he stopped drinking now that he's carrying out his suspension. And he's not going to fight again for the rest of this year, at least not officially. Maybe he can schedule some exhibition matches.
Nothing towards his record, and nothing official.
So when he's out and about, we're supposed to believe that this guy's down in virgin margaritas and warm glasses of milk.
Yeah, right.
The World Boxing Council's Mauricio Suleiman says they're backing Devin Haney and will allow him to face the champion at either 140 or 147. Technically, the rule allows Devin Haney to go down to 135 for Shakur Stevenson as well if he wants, but he doesn't. He's not going to. Devin can't make 135. I don't think he can make 140. And when he comes back, I don't think he's going to.
He'll come back at 147.
WBC champion at 147 pounds currently is Mario Barrios. But Mario is rumored to be in talks to face a 45-year-old Manny Pacquiao. And Mario, given his limitations as a boxer, he may or may not win that fight. If he can stay champion, the door is open for Devin to challenge him upon his return. Though in truth, upon Devin's return, I don't think he's going to have Mario or a WBC title on his mind. I think he's going to want to run it back with Ryan Garcia. I think he's going to want to do a rematch.
That's what he's going to be focused on.
And when you think about that, and you think about the landscape at 147 pounds, the most lucrative option for Devin would be Ryan, and the most lucrative option for Ryan would be Devin because of the controversy, the banned substance,
the bad blood,
the result of the contest being overturned to a no contest, and what has been and still is Ryan Garcia's constant trolling on social media. Every other day he's taken a shot at Devin Haney. Whether you condone it or condemn it, that's what he's doing, and that could lay the foundations for a rematch that is even bigger than the first fight was.
I think they said the first fight did somewhere in between 400 and 500,000 pay-per-view buys. Given everything that has happened and what has come out since then, the rematch could be even bigger. The rematch might do 1 million buys.
And a rematch with Devin would not require Ryan to go down to 140 or 135 for Gervonta Davis or anybody else. He wouldn't have to go through any severe weight cuts.
Neither would Devin.
They could do it right there at 147 pounds. It's a more lucrative option. It's a fight with more of a profile for the both of them than, say, fighting a Brian Norman and a Montestanionis, or worse, a Jaron Boots Ennis. That them fighting each other draws more eyeballs and more wallets than any of those fights would.
You don't need a belt to sell it because them fighting each other, it's not about a belt.
It's not about a belt, it's some belts. It's a grudge match. The grudge they have for each other. Did Ryan Garcia really defeat Devin Haney cleanly, and can lightning strike twice? Can he do it again?
Can he prove it wasn't a fluke? Can he prove it wasn't the Osterin and it wasn't the weight?
That's how some people feel, whether you agree with them or not. That's what some people are saying. And that's what could help sell a second fight. For Devin, Devin obviously needs redemption. He obviously needs the rematch. You might have had the loss overturned.
It's stricken from the record, but not from people's memories.
Needs to get his lick back.